They say trust is the foundation of every marriage. But what happens when the person you trust most is the one who has been dismantling your life behind your back? People talk about cheating, about financial deception, about emotional neglect, but no one ever warns you about what happens when you find out your marriage ended years ago, and you weren't even aware of it. For 12 years, I believed I had a good marriage. Maybe not the kind filled with grand romantic gestures or dramatic love stories, but solid, stable, built to last. Olivia and I were partners in every sense of the word. I worked long hours in finance, ensuring we had the kind of life most couples dreamed of. Olivia, sharp and independent, handled everything at home. The bills, the paperwork, the day-to-day responsibilities I never thought to question. It was a system that worked, or at least, I thought it did. Looking back, I can see now that Olivia was always in control. She insisted on keeping our finances separate, claiming it was the smart thing to do, that every married couple should have their own financial independence. I had no reason to argue. She was good with money, organized, always on top of things. She was always the one who handled our taxes, our insurance, any legal paperwork that came through the house. I trusted her completely, and that was my first mistake. For years, Olivia had an unusual habit of taking business trips every few months. They were always urgent, last minute, non-negotiable. She worked in event planning, so it made sense. I never questioned it. Why would I? She always came back home, always acted the same. If anything, the time apart made things easier. We never fought, never had any major problems. Our marriage felt effortless, but I should have noticed the small things. She never let me pick her up from the airport. She always insisted on handling the mail herself. Whenever I brought up long-term plans, retirement, buying a second home, future vacations, she would nod and agree but never seemed truly invested. I thought she just wasn't the sentimental type. I was wrong. The unraveling of my life didn't come in some dramatic moment of revelation. It wasn't an affair exposed through a secret phone or suspicious texts. It started with something simple: renewing my passport. I had planned a solo trip to Europe. Olivia had encouraged me to go, saying it would be good for me to take a break. I submitted my passport renewal, expecting nothing more than a routine process. But a week later, my application was flagged. The reason? My marital status was listed as divorced. At first, I laughed. A ridiculous mistake, an error in the system. I called the records office, fully expecting them to apologize and fix it. But when they pulled up my file, I felt my stomach drop. According to their records, I had been legally divorced for 4 years. And the person who filed the paperwork? Olivia. I sat there in stunned silence, gripping the phone. For years. That meant for the last 4 years, while I had been celebrating anniversaries, planning for our future, and living every day as a married man, Olivia had already legally erased me from her life. But if we weren't legally married, then what the hell were we? I felt like I had stepped into a version of my life that I no longer recognized. The house I had lived in for a decade felt different. The woman I had spent my life with felt like a stranger. Had she been planning to leave and changed her mind? Was this some kind of financial maneuver? Or was there something much worse waiting beneath the surface? I didn't confront her. Not yet. If Olivia had managed to secretly divorce me without me knowing, there was no telling what else she had done. I needed to be sure. I needed proof. That night, while Olivia slept beside me like nothing had changed, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many other secrets were hiding in plain sight. I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was a man who had just realized his entire marriage might be a lie, and I was about to find out just how deep the betrayal went. They say that once suspicion enters your mind, it's impossible to ignore. It creeps in like a slow-moving poison, tainting every interaction, making you second-guess every moment you once took for granted. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but I didn't have a choice. I needed answers. After discovering that I had been legally divorced for 4 years without my knowledge, my mind spiraled with questions. Why had Olivia done this? If she had truly wanted to leave, why had she stayed? If it was some kind of financial or legal maneuver, why not tell me? The problem was that nothing about our marriage had changed. We still acted like a married couple. She still wore her ring. We still went on vacations together. We still hosted holidays as husband and wife. If she had filed for divorce, what was the point of maintaining the illusion? I told myself I wasn't going to confront her until I had more information. If she had been hiding something for years, she wouldn't just suddenly confess because I asked the right question. I needed proof. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before I tipped her off. That's when I started watching her. It wasn't easy. Olivia had never given me any reason to be suspicious before. She didn't hide her phone. She didn't disappear at odd hours of the night. There were no secretive glances, no whispered calls in another room. If anything, her life was shockingly normal. That should have reassured me, but it didn't. It made it worse. Because if nothing had changed, then why had she taken such a drastic legal step? I started small. I paid attention to her schedule, her habits, the way she moved through our home. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She went to work at the same time every morning, came home when she always had, scrolled through her phone without secrecy, and asked about my day like she always did. She wasn't hiding anything, at least, not in any obvious way. But then there were the trips. The same ones I had never questioned before. The work trips that came up every few months, always last minute, always non-negotiable. I had accepted them as part of her job in event planning, never once thinking they could be anything else. Now, I wasn't so sure. I checked our shared calendar. Her next trip was in 3 weeks. A 3-day conference in another city. At least, that was the reason she had given me. But I needed to be sure. I started digging. I checked her email, something I had never felt the need to do before. There were no suspicious messages, no hidden accounts or secret conversations. But then I noticed something odd. No confirmation emails for her upcoming trip. No flight details. No hotel reservations. Nothing. If this was truly a conference, shouldn't there be some kind of record? The more I searched, the more unsettled I became. It wasn't just this trip. It was all of them. Every trip she had taken over the past few years had no digital footprint. No receipts, no travel confirmations, no signs that she had actually gone where she said she had. So where had she been going? I checked her bank statements next. Olivia was smart, too smart. She had always insisted on keeping our finances separate, something I had never thought twice about. But now I understood why. There was nothing suspicious in our joint account because she had made sure I never had access to the one that mattered. I kept going, digging into every piece of information I could find. But Olivia had covered her tracks well. Still, something didn't sit right with me. If she had truly divorced me and kept it from me for 4 years, why hadn't she left? Why continue living a normal married life? Why still wear her ring? Why pretend like we were still the same couple we had always been? I watched her more closely in the following weeks, waiting for any sign of deception. And I found nothing. She still kissed me before leaving for work. She still curled up next to me on the couch while we watched movies. She still planned vacations, asked about my day, made my favorite meals, and acted like my wife in every way. And that terrified me. Because if she was hiding something, it meant she was an expert at it. I needed something bigger, something real. That's when I made a decision I never thought I would. I would follow her. When she left for her trip, I would track her every move, see exactly where she went, find out once and for all what she had been hiding. Because if she was still lying after all this time, then I wasn't just living in a fake marriage. I was living with a stranger. They say the truth will set you free, but no one ever tells you about the weight it puts on your chest before you finally get to it. I had spent weeks pretending everything was normal, watching Olivia, tracking her movements, searching for any hint of deception. And the worst part? I found nothing. She still acted the same, still followed her usual routines, still laughed at my jokes, still kissed me goodnight. Every interaction felt so normal that it made my paranoia feel ridiculous. And yet, the legal record said otherwise. She had divorced me. She had erased our marriage, and I had no idea why. The pressure in my head became unbearable. Every time she smiled at me, every time she reached for my hand, I felt like I was staring at a stranger. My mind twisted every innocent moment into something sinister. Was she pretending? Had she always been pretending? If she had been able to live a lie this well for 4 years, what else was she capable of? I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. That night, after dinner, I asked her, I told her about the mistake on my passport application, about how I had checked my records, about how they said we weren't married. I watched her closely, waiting for a flicker of fear, for the telltale signs of someone caught in a lie. But Olivia didn't panic. She looked surprised, confused, even. Then, smoothly, she sighed and sat down, shaking her head with an exasperated expression, like this was just another inconvenience she had to deal with. She told me it was a legal technicality, something about restructuring assets, making sure we were financially protected in case of future lawsuits. She said she had handled everything herself to keep things simple, to avoid unnecessary stress on me. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to accept her answer and move on, to push the nagging feeling aside and go back to the life I thought I had. But then she reached across the table and took my hands. Her voice softened, her expression warm. She told me that she loved me, that she had only ever loved me, that I was her everything. And just like that, the doubt in my head waged war with the truth I had uncovered. If she was lying, she was incredible at it. There was no hesitation, no guilt in her voice, no cracks in her carefully constructed world. She held my gaze, unshaken, telling me that we were fine, that we had always been fine, that I was overthinking things. She kissed me then, slow and deliberate, like she was grounding me back into the reality she wanted me to believe in. And I almost did. Because after all, if she had really done something so terrible, if she had really planned something behind my back, wouldn't there be signs? Wouldn't I have noticed before now? I felt like I was losing my mind. Olivia got up, acting like everything was settled. She poured herself a glass of wine, scrolling through her phone, completely unbothered. I sat there at the table, my hands still resting where hers had been moments before, staring at nothing. Something still wasn't right, but she had given me nothing to hold on to. No mistakes, no confessions, no cracks in her story. And if I was wrong, if I really was overthinking everything, then why did I still feel like I was married to someone who wasn't really there? People talk about gut instincts, about that deep, nagging feeling when something just isn't right. I had ignored mine for years. I had let logic and routine smother the voice in my head, telling me that something about Olivia wasn't what it seemed. And when she sat across from me, looked me in the eyes, and told me that I was her only love, I almost let myself believe her. Almost. For a few weeks after our conversation, I convinced myself that I had let my paranoia get the best of me. Olivia carried on like nothing had happened, completely at ease, as if she had nothing to hide. She still made dinner, still scrolled through her phone on the couch while we watched TV, still kissed me goodnight. I felt like an idiot for ever suspecting her. Maybe there really had been some legal technicality. Maybe I had been spiraling over nothing. But gut instincts don't just go away. And sometimes, the truth finds you when you're not even looking for it. It happened on an ordinary day. I was at home, going through some paperwork, mostly bills and insurance documents, nothing unusual. Olivia had left a few letters unopened on the kitchen counter, and as I sorted through them, one envelope stood out. It was from a life insurance company. We had separate accounts, so I wouldn't have thought twice about it, except the letter was addressed to her. But the last name on the envelope wasn't mine. At first, I thought it was a typo, some clerical error. But something about it hit me in a way I couldn't explain. I stared at the name, my pulse quickening. It wasn't just any last name. It was a name I had never heard before. I ripped the envelope open, my hands shaking. Inside was a policy update for a joint life insurance plan. Not just for Olivia, for her and her spouse. And the spouse listed on the document wasn't me. My vision blurred as I stared at the name again, trying to process what I was looking at. Olivia had a legal husband, and his name sure as hell wasn't James. My hands were cold. My breath felt too shallow. She hadn't just divorced me in secret. She had remarried, and I had been living in her second life without even knowing it. The room felt like it was closing in on me. I reached for my phone, my mind racing with questions. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? Had I been financing her lifestyle while she was playing wife to someone else? Had she been bouncing between two marriages like it was just a scheduling conflict? I needed proof. Something undeniable. Something that would make this real, because right now, it felt like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I dug through Olivia's files, heart pounding in my ears. In the back of a drawer, hidden beneath years of tax returns and medical records, I found what I was looking for. A marriage certificate. Not ours. Hers. And it was dated 3 years ago. 3 years ago, while I was planning our anniversary trip, while I was filing taxes under the belief that I had a wife, she was walking down the aisle with someone else. The betrayal had layers I hadn't even begun to understand. She had been legally married to another man while continuing to live with me. But why? What was the end game? Was I just a financial backup? A safety net? My hands clenched the paper as the answer became painfully clear. She had erased our marriage so that she could legally start a new one, without ever leaving me behind. She had been playing both sides, and I had been too blind to see it. Now I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was her unknowing ex-husband. And Olivia had no idea I knew. They say the worst betrayals come from those closest to you, but I never thought that applied to the woman I had spent 12 years of my life with. Finding out that Olivia had secretly divorced me and married another man was already beyond anything I could have imagined. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to know who he was. The name on the life insurance letter was still burned into my mind. Ethan Carter. I had never heard of him. He wasn't a coworker, wasn't a name that had ever come up in our conversations. He wasn't anyone I should have recognized. And yet, my wife had married him 3 years ago. I could have confronted her right then and there, but I wanted the full story first. Olivia had already proven she was capable of deception on a level I hadn't thought possible. If she had been playing a double life for years, then I needed to be smart. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. That's when I remembered Tom. Tom and I had been friends for years. We had gone to college together, stayed close even after life took us in different directions. He worked as a detective, had access to records that I never could have pulled on my own. More importantly, he owed me. A few years back, I had helped him out of a tough financial situation, nothing illegal, but something that had saved his career. He had never forgotten it. I reached out to him, not giving too much detail over the phone, just that I needed information on someone. He didn't ask questions. A few hours later, he sent me everything he could find on Ethan Carter. And that was when the final piece of my wife's deception clicked into place. Ethan wasn't some random guy. He was her childhood friend. I sat there, staring at my phone, reading through the records Tom had sent me. Ethan Carter had grown up in the same town as Olivia. They had gone to school together, had been close for years before life took them in different directions. There were no records of him being married before Olivia, no past legal troubles. Just a normal, unremarkable man who, 3 years ago, had legally become my wife's husband. The realization made my stomach twist. This wasn't some impulsive affair. This wasn't Olivia meeting someone at work or rekindling a short-lived romance. This had history. This was someone she had known for decades, someone who had probably always been in the back of her mind. And I had never seen it coming. I thought back to every conversation Olivia and I had ever had about her past. She had mentioned childhood friends in passing, talked about people she had lost touch with over the years. But Ethan's name had never come up. Not once. That meant she had been hiding him deliberately. Had they stayed in touch behind my back for years? Had she been planning this long before she filed for divorce? Had I been the obstacle she had to maneuver around so she could finally have the life she really wanted? The answer was obvious. I wasn't just a man who had been cheated on. I was the roadblock she had finally removed. She had been waiting for this, and now I was going to make sure she regretted every second of it. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in justice. Olivia had spent years living a lie, carefully weaving a life that let her have everything: wealth, stability, social status, and the perfect husband she never really wanted. She had counted on my trust, on my blind devotion, on my belief that she would never betray me in such a way. She had counted on me never finding out. She had been dead wrong. Once I had all the pieces, the secret divorce, the hidden marriage, the fact that she had rekindled her past with Ethan Carter, the man she had probably always wanted but could never have before. It was time to bring it all down. But Olivia wasn't just a liar. She was a master manipulator. If I wanted to win, I couldn't just expose her. I had to completely dismantle the life she had built on deception. I took my time. The first step was filing for divorce again. Legally, we were already divorced, but that didn't mean I couldn't still go after her. There were still assets. There were still joint accounts. There were still legal avenues I could use to strip her of everything she had stolen from me. I worked with my lawyer, Greg, to put together a case that ensured she wouldn't just walk away from this unscathed. The second step was exposing her to everyone who mattered. Olivia had spent years cultivating an image, a polished, elegant woman who was admired in her wealthy social circles. She had surrounded herself with other high-status couples, always playing the role of the perfect wife, the woman who had it all. They were her real safety net, the people she relied on for reputation, status, influence. So, I made sure they knew exactly who she really was. I didn't do it in some dramatic, movie-style way. No yelling at dinner parties, no throwing drinks in her face. I simply let the truth find its way to the right people. Copies of the divorce records. Proof that she had legally removed me from her life years ago, while still pretending to be my devoted wife. Bank statements showing the hidden financial transactions. And, most importantly, proof of her marriage to Ethan Carter. Her wealthy friends, the same ones who thrived on status and social power, were the first to turn on her. They weren't interested in being associated with someone who had built their life on fraud and deception. People like them didn't admire liars, they fed on them. I heard through mutual acquaintances that the invitations stopped first. Then the charity events, the brunches, the social outings. She had built her world on the illusion of perfection. And once that illusion shattered, there was nothing left for her to hold on to. She tried to do damage control. She spun her stories, tried to paint herself as the victim. But the problem with being a lifelong liar is that people start to notice when every version of the story is different. One by one, the people who once admired her started distancing themselves. She lost everything. And Ethan? He didn't come out unscathed either. He had probably assumed she would slide seamlessly from my life into his, taking with her all the wealth, security, and privilege she had enjoyed for years. But Olivia wasn't leaving with money. She wasn't leaving with influence. She was leaving with nothing. She had burned every bridge. The financial security she had counted on? Gone. The powerful network of friends? Gone. The reputation she had spent years crafting? Gone. She had thought she was untouchable. She had thought she could erase me and replace me without consequence. But what she hadn't counted on was the fact that I was smarter than her. I had spent years assuming we were partners, that I was sharing my life with someone who wanted the same future as me. But Olivia had never wanted a future with me. She had wanted a future with security. And when she had finally gotten the man she had always wanted, she had assumed she could quietly dispose of the man who had given her everything. She underestimated me. And in the end, she lost everything. I walked away without looking back. I didn't need to. Her own lies had finally caught up to her.